Marla, philanthropist, eternal optimist, former people pleaser, investment banker, autism mom. You good?
I'm great.
Marla,
Claire,
thanks for being here.
thanks for inviting me.
It's so fun.
This is great. And what a beautiful day and a beautiful spot.
I know. It's so great to live in LA. We're so blessed with vacation land,
All the time.
right?
You know what we call this?
What?
Wednesday.
Well, here we are. Thanks for being on my podcast. You make me look good.
I'll try.
And, I just want to know what's in your heart. And I kind of feel like I do. You do so many things for so many organizations and stand by many causes, have raised a very successful family, have had an incredible career, have an incredible marriage. And what's inner success? What does inner success mean to you, and how does it make you feel?
Inner success, for me, so much is about balance. And when I say balance, I don't mean that everything's in balance all the time. Quite often, balance means you're out of balance and then you bring it back in balance. But I guess when I think about the things that are important to me and how I define inner success and how I define my own happiness and fulfillment, it's about having a mix, maybe balance is the wrong word, mix might be a better word, between a thriving and happy family, my kids doing well, succeeding in whatever way they want to succeed, whatever they choose to do, having some of the relationships we talked about. With my husband, we'll celebrate a 30-year anniversary next year. We've known each other since 1990. But, it's having family, friends, communities. I mean, you referenced some of the organizations I've been involved with over the year, whether it was my corporate job for 18 years, other corporate roles I've had, whether it's small communities like, the exercise class I go to locally 6 days a week, that community, to the people I walk dogs with in my neighborhood, to, organizations I'm involved with, nonprofits and others, schools. I just take so much energy from the people around me. And I also take a lot of energy and happiness and fulfillment, and I guess as I define my inner success, from helping others, not in a Mother Teresa-y sort of way, but in I like to connect people. I often describe myself as a connector. I do think one of the best things I have is my network, and I leverage that network. And when I say network, I mean super broadly defined.
Right.
You name the community, I stay in touch with that community. I take such great joy in connecting people from different communities to each other. And I take great joy in, helping young people who are right out of school with what should I be doing? How should I be thinking about life and career? To talking to people who are quite a bit older than me too, who might be transitioning into another part of their life. So that gives me a lot of joy and a lot of happiness. And, I feel lucky that I've got my health. The people around me who I'm closest to have their health. I have two parents who are healthy and in their mid-80s, and that's kind of amazing. And siblings and their families, and two grown children who are now out in the working world, ages 25 and almost 23, which is kind of remarkable because that's, as you know, Claire, that's what first connected us. That's been a real journey, not just for our son Aiden, who's on the autism spectrum and who's now a second grade teacher at a charter school in Dallas, Texas.
After he went to University of Pennsylvania.
After he went to, from special ed schools to mainstreaming at the school that your middle child is at today, to the Ivy League. It's kind of remarkable. And now he's giving back and teaching.
Beyond remarkable.
Second, we're never sure what exactly was going to happen. And our daughter, Helena, has an incredible EQ, but she had her own learning challenges and differences that she's overcome. And now she's working in New York in the food and hospitality business. It's awesome.
Wow. So, I mean, yeah, it just feels like you live and breathe success in your community, in yourself, in your family. To me, that's also what success is. I feel like when I'm truly connected with myself, I can be connected with my family, whether or not we're going through ups and downs.
Right.
And yeah, you mentioned, we did initially connect because of our autism connection.
Yeah.
And I was in the thick of it. I still am in the thick of it. Winston is 7. And he's so brilliant and he's so different. And while I wouldn't change him, I wouldn't want him to not be on the spectrum. Sometimes it's very isolating and confusing, and there's no straight path forward. And I've really gone to you with questions. And because you've been able to live it, I feel less alone in that journey. Was someone there for you when you were kind of going through it?
No, there was a lot of trial and error,
Right.
Claire. And I will tell you, my husband and I were just having this conversation. We were walking on the beach in the South Bay, and I forget who asked who first, what would you change? Looking back on just our journey together, what would you change? And one thing that he said was, well, I would tell Aiden much sooner he was on the spectrum, because we didn't tell him for a very long time. So we were in New York, as you know, until 11 years ago. And very early we knew that he had learning differences. And very early we knew that he was on the spectrum. But what I didn't want to do was provide him with a label that in some way limited him, where he could go, what he could do.
He could use it as a cop-out. I can't do my homework, I'm on the
could
spectrum, or whatever it was.
achieve. And so we really didn't share that with him until a lot later, till we were out here. I forget whether he was in middle school. He might have already even been in
Ninth grade,
I think it was. And Chris, my husband, put together an incredible PowerPoint presentation. What is the spectrum? What is a spectrum? What is the spectrum? Who's on the spectrum? Da Vinci, Einstein, famous.
I mean, you shared it with me and it was
that's
jaw-dropping.
Right. That's right. It was incredible.
It was jaw-dropping.
And
he's jaw-dropping, your husband.
He absolutely is. He's phenomenal. And, it was hard. Aiden was angry. He was unhappy. Although on this beach walk with my husband, I said to him, I hear what you're saying, and you're probably right. Although, I don't know if in New York it would have been the same as in California, explaining the spectrum diagnosis, honestly, especially 25 years ago. There's a big difference between a 7-year-old and a 25-year-old, right?
Yeah. Huge.
And then I'm also part of maybe my inner happiness, I don't know if I'd call it success, is around, I like to be introspective and I like to think about what I could have done differently or better, but I don't second guess myself. If I've made a decision and I've done something, I don't beat myself up over making the wrong decision. I might need to make a new decision, change that decision, pivot to do something differently, but I really don't do that. And I think part of that is just my mindset. I think I know I'm always positive. I know I'm always optimistic, even in the face of difficulties. I'm always in, all right, how do we make the best out of this situation, even if it's not a good situation? And so to get back to the question you asked was, did I have mentors or role models, or did I know people who had kids on the spectrum? I didn't. I was learning as I went along. And I was very pregnant with Helena, because they're 2 years apart, when we got the diagnosis.
I was pregnant with Constantine.
And I remember it started with speech therapy. So then the speech therapist said, he's awfully ticklish. You should go to occupational therapy. So we got an occupational therapy write-up diagnosis. And the occupational therapist, instead of calling to explain it to us, sent us a report in the mail, and we read it and we were like, oh my God, it's not the way you would ever want to deliver this kind of information or news.
He's on the spectrum. You're like, what is the spectrum?
Well, they didn't even say that, but
Oh.
when you read this report, it sounded as if, I mean, it sounded like this was a very, very, very impaired child. And this was a very
I don't mean to laugh, but
happy child.
he's so brilliant.
And happy and sweet and funny and, you know, all of that. So I was just like, so I just,
So tough.
it was trial and error. It was throwing whatever therapies and experts at it we could, and
Right.
listening to what made sense. And if something didn't work, pivoting. And if something did work, maybe you do more of it or you keep doing it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until much later that I started to meet parents who had kids with learning differences that were quite obvious or more pronounced. A couple of parents with kids who were on the spectrum. But I think we were all kind of learning as we went along. I do think there's a lot more of a network today and a greater understanding and a greater willingness to talk about this in a way that is so constructive and great for our kids and for the parents and for everyone around them.
Yeah, I'll never forget. That's one of the first things you said. You said, tell Winston. And then I, soon after, met Rosie O'Donnell, who has a spectrum child, and she told me, and her child and Winston are good friends, and she said, just tell Winston that he's on the spectrum. You should just tell him this weekend. And I said, okay, I'll do it. And so we were in the kitchen, and I said, I looked at Greg and I said, can I tell Winston he's on the spectrum? And he said, sure, whatever, you know, nonchalant. And so I said, Winston, I think I asked him if he knew what the autism spectrum was, and he said no. And I said, oh, well, you're on it. And you know, we told him all the brilliant people that have different minds. And he looks at me and he says, is Godzilla on the spectrum? Or maybe he even said, are the people that made Godzilla on the spectrum? And Greg and I looked and said,
I hope you said probably right.
no, we said, obviously they're on the spectrum. And he was like, let's have a dance party. I'll
Awesome.
never forget. That was it.
Amazing. Let's have a dance party. I have another dear friend who's a New Roads parent who has a son on the spectrum in the spectrum program at New Roads. And she was an educator herself. They came from New York. And she told her son really early, she was like, you know, one day we just went for a hike, or maybe it was a walk on the beach.
Yeah.
And I just laid it out there. And that was the first time I was like, okay, I probably should have done it differently.
No.
But I didn't.
But the thing is that you did it the perfect way that you did it. And that was where you were then. And that was exactly how Aiden needed to hear it, because it happened. Right. And you were doing the best you could, and Chris was doing the best he could. So that's it. You know, now you have different wisdom and you can pay it forward to me or to whatever.
Right.
You know, and I don't know, mine was so nonchalant. I think about, should we bring it up again?
Right.
You know?
Did it sink in?
Did it sink in? Does it need to sink in? Listen, it's just been a really lonely journey. I'm not going to lie.
Yes.
And it's been a tough journey, but it's been a beautiful journey of self-discovery that I wouldn't have otherwise been granted the opportunity to really dive deep and think, who am I? What am I doing? What do I stand for? I would not have such depth.
I totally agree with that. And Chris, I mean, I will quote my husband for a minute, who said, oh my God, I mean, Aiden, I don't know if I was the right dad for Aiden, but he was so the right son for me.
Oh.
He has made me such a more understanding and I would say the same thing about myself, understanding, kind, patient, able to really understand or appreciate difference in ways that I hadn't heretofore, and not judge it or not jump to some sort of assumption about somebody because of the way they present or behave or act or speak or any of that. And I don't think of myself at all as a judgmental person ever, but
What you don't know, you don't know.
yeah.
And so you're going to just be ignorant to what you don't know. And if you've never met a person who's on the spectrum, then it's hard to know what it's like. It turns out there's a lot of spectrum in my family of origin even. And just there's a lot of spectrum. A few of my cousins are on the spectrum, and they've been recently diagnosed, all post Winston.
Yeah.
Winston was severely impacted in that he couldn't really speak until he was 4.
Yeah.
So we all had to really pay attention. I had to pay attention and advocate for what was going on. So I realized we're really a family of individuals and a family of thinkers and a family of creative, emotional beings. And I think that apples don't fall far.
Yeah.
And that it's just kind of what makes us interesting. It's another layer.
It is another layer.
But I'm worried. I'm still worried about his future. I'm worried about his cognition. I'm worried about all the things. And I see your son who went to an Ivy League school, and my brother went to an Ivy League school. A lot of my family did. I don't need to project that path onto my kids. I have a bit of a chip on my shoulder that I didn't go to an Ivy League school, but I get through it every day. It's okay.
You've done all right.
I've done very well. And there's so many different layers to motherhood and to life. So you moved from New York 11 years ago?
11 years ago.
And you were a banker at Goldman Sachs for a while.
I was at Goldman Sachs for 18 years, right out of undergrad.
Wow.
Until 2007. And people who know that 2007 was the financial crisis said, "Oh, you were so prescient. You knew." And I said, No. It was just time to leave.
Oh, wow. You left right before.
Right before the you-know-what hit the fan.
And did you retire or something? What were you doing?
I did not leave at that point.
You were quite young.
To not work. I was 40. Was I 40? I was 40.
You were 40.
Or not even 40, 39.
I'm 39, and let me tell you, the work is just beginning.
Yeah,
for
well,
me.
there you go. But I left at that point not to work, or not to not work, sorry, double negative. But I realized how much my kids needed me.
Okay.
And I also realized that I was able to throw myself into some of my nonprofit work. I joined a nonprofit board. The first board I joined was when I was still at Goldman. I think the kids were like 4 and 2. And I woke up one day and said, I've nailed this career thing. I'm not going to get fired anytime soon. My husband's not going to divorce me. My kids are good. I've got a good nanny. There was all this stuff. So I joined my first board. And I think that was really helpful because when I left Goldman, I sort of threw myself into my nonprofit board work like it was a full-time job. So it kind of gave me that professional thing that
and they were all so grateful
for. Yes.
And they still are grateful.
And I spent a lot of time in my skill set, whether it's my finance skill set or my people mentoring, training, recruiting. I did a lot of that at Goldman. Actually, my last 5 years at the firm, I was actually building a headhunting function for the firm. So I was doing kind of an entrepreneurial little different thing and wasn't doing investment banking anymore. And some of that was just to get my life a little more under control so that I wasn't flying back-to-back red eyes, God knows where, and working 100-hour weeks because I was a mother and I wanted to see my children. And I thought, well, if you have kids, shouldn't you see those kids and spend time with them? And at the time, my husband was a banker. Yeah, it just the journey sort of unfolded with me realizing I needed to be there more and more for the kids, for both of them, that I was lucky enough to be able to do interesting nonprofit board work and ended up joining one arts board that I'm still very involved with 15, 20 years later, a global NGO that you and I are now involved with when I was on the board.
Action Against
Hunger. And we're now advisory council members out here in LA together, which is so fun.
So fun.
What a great organization. And, and I was very involved with my kids' schools, which was a helpful thing because I wanted to be close to it, but I was also able to use, again, my finance skills, join their finance committee, help with their development and their fundraising. So that was rewarding, and it got me, interested in a number of different topics and organizations, and again, new networks, new people, and a way to really kind of have impact, even if it wasn't a paycheck every 2 weeks, which, by the way, a paycheck every 2 weeks is a great thing. That is something that when we talk about the future, it's like, okay, shouldn't I have a paycheck sometime soon?
Well, you can always
I've,
go back
I've had
to
my
work.
moments. I mean, in the past,
I mean, how many years has it been
so I
since
left Goldman in 2007, but I've
so
done
almost 20 years.
consulting
Okay.
gigs in that period of time. I've had a couple of significant interim roles during 2020, during COVID. I went back to work full time on an interim basis, and 3 months turned into 8 months. I was a chief HR officer for an educational technology company called Dreambox Learning, which was great because I'm passionate about education. I mean, the things I'm passionate about are global hunger, the arts, education. If those are the three top things I would pick, and there are quite a few other things I'm passionate about too, but those are three big ones. I'm still considering, do I want to go back to work on a full-time basis? Do I want to go back to work on a part-time basis? Do I want to continue to just consult and invest and do interim roles as they come about? And I'm figuring that out. I mean, I'll be honest, I've not decided one way or another. There's a part of me that says I still envision myself as this full-time working professional. And then there's this other part of me that says nothing's more important than being able to, at the drop of a hat, see my grown children when I can see my grown children, wherever that is, and also be available to aging parents and to other things around me.
And now that's your heart speaking, right?
That's my heart. And this idea of, when I said balance, what I really meant was a portfolio approach of what I spend my time on. Because there's not one thing that is the most important. Well, that's not true. There is one thing that's the most important thing. It's my family. But there's not the one thing that I would give up everything else for just to focus on.
Right.
So that's a little different than, early on in our careers, right? When you come right out of college and you take on a ridiculous job.
But not everybody does that. I
That's
didn't
true.
do that.
That's
I
true.
was writing songs in New
Yeah.
York City, hoping I would get further on American Idol every day, and I did.
And
but,
you did.
But I was singing at weddings for years
Mm-hmm.
post American Idol, spending my spare time in the recording studio becoming a rock star.
Yeah.
So everyone has their different path.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm catching up in my career now, whatever that means. So many of these people that I'm speaking to were so ambitious in their early years, right?
Right. Head down, nose to
Head
the
down,
grindstone.
nose to the grind.
Right.
Get all your degrees, make your money. Let's do it. There's no time to waste. And I'm kind of like 39 now doing what I want to do.
Yeah. It's interesting because, I think one thing that, as I was reflecting before our conversation today about, a piece of advice I would perhaps give is take risks. Take calculated risks. Don't take stupid risks. But
What do you mean?
grab opportunity. Like, if I think about my career, there were times I just kept raising my hand to do crazy things at Goldman Sachs, very off the beaten path. Like,
even if someone was going to say no, you didn't care.
sometimes, even though somebody would say no. Yeah.
You would do it.
Yeah. Or even in college when I said, I'm going to study abroad in Paris, Duke. And they said, well, you can't go to the Duke program because you really don't speak French, Marla. You took 2 semesters and you never went to class, and so you can't. And I was like, so they said, you can go on an English-speaking program. And I said, well, doesn't that negate the whole rationale of going to a foreign country where you want to immerse yourself? And
Well, London's a fabulous place with a very different culture.
It is, and I lived in London later with Goldman Sachs, but I, figured out a way to find a program that would take me in Paris with my poor French-speaking skills and plop me down with a French family.
And Duke would still honor your...
And they still gave me credit.
Credit.
It was through a different college, and it was an incredible, so I guess I've been someone who I don't like to, and I don't often take no for an answer if there's something I really, really, really want to do.
Yeah.
There's a great rationale, okay. But, and then at Goldman, I raised my hand at the end of 2 years and said, sure, I'll go to London. Never lived there, but I've lived in Europe, so that's cool. And then when I was in London, we were doing some work with the Russian government back in 1992, and I said, I'm an oil and gas banker. There's a lot of oil and gas in Russia. There's West Siberia. There's all those oil reserves. Don't you need help? So I started traveling back and forth to Russia. And then I got the opportunity to move to Russia. And my now husband, then boyfriend, quit his job to move with me to Moscow in 1993. And I wouldn't trade those things for
And that experience.
anything, that experience, even though, did it maybe slow my career down in terms of certain promotion and progression a little bit? Probably, but those are so much more
But you
meaningful.
retired at 40, so.
But those are the meaningful things, right? Those
Yeah.
are and the things, it was also the things that were so great to do before having kids. I'm not sure I'd be hopping on an Aeroflot jet to West Siberia with kids. Certainly wouldn't do it today, but that's a whole different story. But even back then.
I know. So do you think that people project a future onto our different kids because they don't think that they can achieve XYZ? Do you think that the stakes weren't high and there wasn't that pressure for them to go to Ivies because they're on the spectrum? Like, well, can you backtrack and kind of?
Well, I think it's more of, is it too stressful? Is it too much? Doesn't it make more sense to be closer to home in a smaller environment at a smaller college or
Yes,
university?
but Winston's out to lunch when it comes to like other people's stress.
Mm-hmm.
It's really he's 7, but it's what he wants to do and how he wants to live. And he's currently learning Korean and Japanese. And we're like, what about French? And he's
Wow.
like, the only thing that is good about France is the baguettes. Like,
Well, there you go.
you know, we're really trying. I mean, we're really trying to do the French with him, but he's so kind of that if someone was like, it's really important for you to go to XYZ school, he'd be like, that's great. You have that idea. It's amazing. Okay, I'm going to go learn.
But I'm going to go do this.
Well, it's just not even,
Yeah.
you know, you can't blanket spectrum people, but.
No. I just think before Aiden, there hadn't been kids in the Spectrum program who had done that. So it was kind of an uncharted territory. I don't think it's
Do you
about
think it was
the
your
limiting.
advocacy and you're also supporting him to do whatever he needed to do?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely were like,
Yeah, I
okay,
think so.
well, I appreciate that this is your college list that you think is the right college list, but we're also going to look at these colleges and we'll see what
Again,
happens. And
your
again,
advocacy.
we tried to talk
Your
him out of
risk-taking.
Penn.
I mean,
But it turned out to be a great place for him.
And Penn was
And
amazing.
He felt
for him.
great about being there. He loved Philly.
him.
The fact that he lived in the dorm, then he lived in an apartment, he lived on his own. He did it. He advocated, he used the resources. I mean, there's at universities, there's the Office of Disability, and he would meet with somebody there once a week or twice a week, I guess, to help with like executive functioning
awesome.
and planning.
That's so awesome.
And those resources are there at these colleges. At every college, there's a certain number
But
of
not
resources.
everybody's
At Penn,
accessing them.
there were a lot of resources.
Of course, it's
a lot
Penn.
because it's Penn.
So really, again, it's like you taking risks to not follow somebody else's list. This is a constant theme in your whole life.
Yeah.
It's pretty major.
Well, trusting how we feel, listening to counsel, but then synthesizing it and coming up with the right answer for us, for
Right.
our family, for for the question at hand. And
Wow.
yeah. And he will always be a kid that went to Penn and had this great experience and loved living in Philadelphia. He's a city kid. I mean, the fact that he's living in a place without public transportation right now is kind of hilarious.
know.
Because he doesn't drive right now. But
Thank God for Uber.
he loved it. He loved it and is proud of it and feels good about it. And it was his choice. I mean, we did say, okay, if you so choose to do this, there are some caveats. You must use the Office of Disability. You must, there were a few
Right.
things where like, you're only going if you do these things. And you've got to keep doing them.
And he did it
And he did it.
for 4 years.
Yeah. And so with both of our kids, it was their choice. Where do you want to go? What kind of environment do you want to be in? What works for you? And I think they both ended up in places that were really kind of great for them.
That's success as a mom.
That's great. It's great. Success for them as them,
Yeah.
It's cool. And then they just get to build on that.
Well,
Which is exciting.
Yeah, and I can't wait to continue to see how it all unfolds.
Same with you and yours. Yours, have a
Yeah,
few
it's
more
fun.
years ahead of them. It's a blast.
I know. I can't believe I get anxiety thinking they're going to leave the house in like 15 years. We need to have more babies so they'll be with me forever.
I had that thought, and then I was like,
I know. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, but thank you.
Nothing's more rewarding or better than that. That's the best job and the hardest job and the most rewarding and exciting job I've ever had and ever will have.
I know. It's truly the job. And you are my mentor in that job.
Well, right back at you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here and
Of
sharing
course.
today.
Thanks for having me and for the conversation, and many more to be had.
Many, many, many more to be had. And thank you all for listening.